So we're going to do a quick tutorial in Flash today, just a simple ActionScript tutorial. Now if you've played with tweens and onion skinning and some of those things, you've seen some of the power that Flash has, but that's just a little small portion of it. Whether or not Flash lasts the test of time, I don't know, we'll see. But either way, understanding some ActionScript isn't a bad idea because it's based on a lot of the same stuff that JavaScript is based on, which JavaScript isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And there's other talk too about the new version of Flash maybe converting to some other form of output, since we're not sure exactly how some of the Flash applications are going to exist in the current settings. Whether it's going to be completely removed from browsers, or if it's just going to not be part of mobile applications, or I don't know, whatever. We'll see what happens. But either way, Adobe's not ready to get rid of Flash yet. So once your splash loading screen is gone and we have our menu here, we can see ActionScript 3.0 and ActionScript 2.0. These are significantly different. The way the language behaves from one version to the other is significantly different. So I'm going to use 3.0. A lot of the basic stuff may be the same, but it's good to not just randomly choose whatever, because if you start getting into more complex things, you will run into trouble if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, or if you're not paying attention to which version you're writing for and which version they're using in different resources that you're learning from. Here we have our empty documents, and we have a timeline up here that's also empty, and this is pretty much all we need. We're going to do something super simple, so if you're new to programming, if you don't know programming, it's fine, just follow along, you'll be fine. So the first program that we're going to write is called Hello World. It's the program that we write for pretty much any language as our first program. It allows us to kind of get used to the way the program works and to kind of understand sort of the whatever environment we're programming in, as well as some of the basic structure of the language before we try doing something more complex or sophisticated. If you look on here, there's nowhere to really write the code. I have this little T here, and I could try maybe writing some code here, but this isn't where I want to do it, because this is really more of like graphics, not code. So what I actually need to do is I need to go up here to my window menu, and I'm going to choose Actions, and this is where I can modify my code. Now, mine is going to kick out pretty large because I've gone into Preferences, and here under ActionScript, I've changed the fonts. Well, actually I left the font the default, but I've changed the size. And so you can do some of this if you want, if it makes it easier for you to read, or if you just prefer it a certain way. So our first Hello World is really simple. We're going to write trace, and this is a function. So it's going to have parentheses that follow it, and then inside of these parentheses is what we're going to tell it to trace. So trace is sort of like a command, and we're going to tell it to trace the words hello world. We've placed hello world inside of two double quotes, and this sort of tells it that this is like an object, a thing. We call this thing a string because it's a string of characters. Whether they're letters or numbers doesn't matter. The first double quote starts it, and the second double quotes ends it. Tells it where the string starts and where it ends. And at the end of this command, at the end of this function that we're calling, we need to put a semicolon. And that's it. This will now work. Now if we press play right here, we don't see any change, right? It looks as if nothing has happened. We see nothing here, so once again it looks like nothing happens. But if we look up here on this timeline, there's actually a little bitty A there. That means that there's actions attached to this frame. So if we go up here to Control, and we go to Test Movie, and we tell it to test, now we have this blank screen here still, but our output window has magically appeared, and it says the string here. This might not be very useful because your user isn't probably going to see the output or even be aware that it exists. So we want to do this a little bit of a different way. I don't think I closed the test that's running. Yeah, there it is. Let's close that, and we'll reopen Flash, and we'll go back to the timeline. So another way that we can do this is we can click this little text box here that we clicked earlier, and we can just make a little text box here. And over on this right side, we have some of our options for it, like what font it's going to use, and the style and the size and some of these things. What's really more important is not so much where we make this, but instead that we have sort of the right settings for it over here in the properties. The family, the style, the size can be whatever you want, but we need to change it from static text to dynamic text. And so now we can actually give it a name. So we're just going to call it text box with a lowercase t and a capital B. We kind of do that instead of a space. So I've got this text box, it's empty. If I click off, that text box is still there, and that's important. When we were trying to do it with the static text, if I put nothing in the box would disappear. The reason this is important is because now that we have this object with a defined name, we can write in code things that will actually refer to this box. If you're not seeing anything in your code from earlier, the trace option, just make sure that you have your frame here selected on this layer. And we have what we wrote here before, so I'm going to go ahead and remove hello world. Instead, I'm going to write running program. And at the end of this line, after the semicolon, I'm going to press enter to add a new line. I'm going to do text box, so that's telling it that I want it to refer to this text box here, which has this name up here. The name has to match. I could call this whatever I want, so this could be kittens. Doesn't matter really what the name of it is, as long as this name here matches, otherwise it won't find it. So since I changed it to kittens, I have to change it to kittens. And then .text, so this is telling it that it's going to be modifying, or that I'm referring to the text property of this object, of that box. So we're going to make that equal to our string of hello world, and then end it with a semicolon. And so now if we run this, there you go. Now it's really small, and that's okay. We can make that bigger. The thing is, in our code here, we told it what to write, but we didn't give it any styles. So it's pulling the styles from whatever I have the settings on this box. So if I make this a different font, like Verdana, and maybe I increase this to like 38, if I try running it again, and I do test, now it's in Verdana, and it is size 38 or whatever size I put it at. Now what we can also do, if we want to have a little bit of fun with this, there are other properties too. There's not just the text property. So in my actions, I'm also going to tell it that I want it to do kittens.x. Let's change this back to something that makes sense. Let's go back to text box. And now change my code to match. Alright, .x equals, and let's just choose, I don't know, 200. So x is the location on the x-axis. And we can modify the y-axis as well, so .y equals, let's do 300. So now if I run this, it's going to move where that box is located. Alright, so now it's way down here. So x 200 and y 300. Instead of having it set to a specifically defined one, I'm actually going to tell it that I want it to equal mouse x. And now if I try running this, well, the issue is that it's way up here. If I do command and enter, then it's going to try to set it at wherever the x location of my mouse is. Now keep in mind that the x location of my mouse starts here, but the x location of this file starts here, so it's moving it over some. So not exactly ideal, but you get the idea. Now you might be saying, well, why isn't it following it? And that's a good point. Why isn't it following it? And it's because it's only doing it one time. It's running each line once, and then it's finishing. If we wanted this to actually follow the mouse, we would have to get this to do some method of like happening over and over again in like a loop, which we can talk about later.